Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Welcome to another installment in my Introduction to 2nd Edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons series. This is something that I just wanted to do for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I am going to be running a 2nd Edition AD&D game in the very near future, and these videos are just a way to help me sort of refamiliarize myself with the more unique aspects of 2nd Edition AD&D. It can also be a resource for the players in that group that have never experienced 2nd Edition before, and for just individuals that are newer to the hobby. Maybe they've only played the D20 era versions of D&D, like 3rd edition, 3rd, 4th, or 5th edition nowadays, and never experienced some of the older ones. There are some very unique mechanics or systems in the older versions of D&D that you just may not be aware of. So if you're interested in learning about older editions, then this video series may be helpful for that as well. Today we're going to be talking about THAC0, the to-hit armor class 0 mechanic in 2nd edition AD&D. In 2nd edition, one of the things that the game design wanted to do was to allow the players to learn the rules of the game themselves. Because in 1st edition AD&D, the player's handbook didn't have any rules in it whatsoever, or very few, if any. You had all the information that you needed to create your character, such as what the different attributes did, like strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. You also had the information on the character races, the character classes, the different equipment like weapons, armor, and miscellaneous stuff, as well as your spell descriptions, but it didn't really give you a whole lot more than that. The Dungeon Master in 1st edition AD&D was the only one that actually really needed to know the rules. So the players would what they would do in a combat situation is they would roll their d20 when they make an attack. They would tell the DM what they rolled on their d20, and the DM would cross-reference that number on a table or a attack matrices chart, and they would reference the character's class and level along with what number they rolled, and they would use that information to determine whether they hit an enemy's armor class or not. Now, in older D&D, armor class numbers, the better armor you had, the lower your armor class number was. It's not like nowadays where improvements to armor class make your AC number higher. Back then, a lower armor class was better, and it was kind of a source of confusion. So one of the things that I experienced when I was getting into 2nd edition AD&D was the fact that nobody wanted to take 2 minutes to explain to me how to determine whether I hit an enemy or not. They would simply do the 1st edition method of what did you roll on the dice, what class and level are you, and then they would tell me whether I hit or not, which was frustrating. As a player, I wanted to learn the rules. Now, when I bought my first player's handbook, there was a simple, short paragraph that made everything make absolute sense. So I'm just going to read that paragraph. I'm not going to get into other descriptions or anything to convolute or complicate the situation. I'm just going to read the entry on figuring out the to-hit number that you needed to roll on your d20. So again, we've got THAC0 to hit armor class 0, and in this book there was a table, I think it's table 53, and one of the things that this player's handbook does really well that I absolutely love is that it has a bunch of the tables, important charts and tables that you might need for your as a player to know. They actually collect them at the back of the book. And back in the day, I actually had photocopied all of these compiled tables and actually had them stapled together as a reference document that I would take with me. So what we have here, again, we've got our THAC0s for the different class types and the various levels from 1st level all the way up to 20th. And what you would do is you just take your level and your class type, and it tells you what your THAC0 number is. So we're going to use Warrior because Warrior is the example that they use in the description that we're about to read. So the fighter that they're going to be using in the example is a 7th level fighter. Fighters are part of the Warrior class. So you had your Warrior, and then Fighter, Paladin, and Ranger were just subclasses of the Warrior, for example. And the example that they give is a 7th level warrior, or 7th level fighter. So you look at your warrior table, you go over to level 7, and our 7th level fighter is going to have a THAC0 number of 15. It starts at 20, and for the fighter classes, the warrior classes, the THAC0 goes down by 1 every single level until they get to a THAC0 of 1 at level 20. Other classes aren't quite as fortunate. So for example, the cleric's THAC0 goes down by 2 every 3 levels, which again, unnecessarily complicated. Just look at the table. So levels 1, 2, and 3, their THAC0 remains at 20. When they reach level 4, their THAC0 goes down to 18. Eventually, at 20th level, their THAC0 is at 8, so a 20th level cleric can hit a creature with an armor class of 0 if they roll an 8 or better on a d20. The poor wizard, though, holy, they go down by 1 for every 3 levels. So a 20th level wizard still needs to roll a 14 or higher on a d20 to hit something with an armor class of 0. So for 20 levels of progression, their THAC0 number only goes down by 6, which is kind of gross. And then you've got the rogues, which aren't quite as good as the priest, and definitely not as bad as the wizards, but nobody's as good at attacking with weapons as a warrior class is. So again, we've got our THAC0 number for our 7th level fighter, and we're going to go to page 119 from the revised versions of the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual, the 1995 black covered versions of the books. And here we've got, so page 119. So here we have our figure to hit number. Now in this video, I'm only actually going to be reading the first paragraph. I'm going to revisit figuring your to hit number at a later time when I get more into the explanation of combat. But I want to try to stress how simple the THAC0 system is and how easy it is to use if you have a dungeon master that doesn't try to keep everything a secret, which they shouldn't, because it makes things needlessly complicated. So we've got the attack roll, so simple. You just roll a d20 like you do in modern D&D. But we've got the figuring to hit number. So we're just going to be reading this section in this video. So let's zoom in a little bit on the section that we are going to be reading. And it reads as follows. The first step in making an attack roll is to find the number needed to hit the target. So to do that, you subtract the armor class of the target from the attacker's THAC0. Remembering that if they have a negative armor class, you add their armor class rating, their negative armor class rating instead. So if you subtract a negative, it's like adding a positive. But we're not going to worry about that here because the example that we give is not a negative armor class. And really, you shouldn't be experiencing negative armor classes early on in your D&D experience for 2nd edition AD&D at low levels unless your DM is a complete and total jerk, which I did have that happen to me. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, you subtract their armor class from your THAC0 number, and the result is the number that you need to roll minimum on a d20 to hit that character or creature. So the example that they give here is a 7th level fighter, which has a THAC0 of 14, which was on the table that we looked at earlier, table 53, meaning that they need to roll a 14 or better to hit a creature with an armor class of 0. In this case, however, we are attacking an orc wearing chainmail armor, which has an armor class of 6. So to determine your to hit number, you subtract 6 from your THAC0 number of 14, which gives you a result of 8, meaning that, using this example, if this 7th level fighter rolls an 8 or higher on the d20, then they succeed on their attack roll. So another example would be if you had a THAC0 of 15, for example, and you are attacking a creature with an armor class of 5, you subtract 5 from 15, meaning that that character would need to get a total of 10 or higher on their d20 roll in order to successfully strike the creature. Again, if you have an armor or a THAC0 of 12 and you're attacking something with an armor class of 7, then you subtract 7 from 12, and that gives you a 5. So you hit on a 5 or better using that example. So again, the easiest way to do this is just simply subtract the armor class from your THAC0. And this works when the Dungeon Master gives you the armor class, which is how I plan on running my second edition AD&D game. Now, there are some things that can, elaborate on this basic explanation, but I'm going to save that for a later video because, again, I just want the simplest version to be what's focused on here because that's what's going to stick in your mind the best. So, again, take your THAC0, subtract the enemy's armor class, and whatever you get as a result of that is the number you need to roll on a 20-sided dice in order to successfully hit. So again, let's just say your first level character, you have a THAC0 of 20, you're attacking something with an armor class of 6. We'll use that again just because it's the number that's in front of me, and it's like almost 2 in the morning, so my ability to think properly is diminishing. But yeah, you have a THAC0 of 20, you're attacking something with an armor class of 6, you subtract 6 from your THAC0 of 20, and you hit on a roll of 14 or better. So I hope that helps. Again, just for repetition's sake, to make this kind of hopefully hit home, take your THAC0, which is based off of your class and level, subtract the enemy's armor class. The result is the number that you need to roll on a d20 in order to hit. So I hope that helped. And like I said, there are more complicated things that we can apply to this basic system, but we're going to save that for when we get into our more explanations of combat mechanics and how that's going to work. But we're going to leave that off here today. So let me know in the comments below if you were playing second edition back in the day. Was this the way that you did things? Is this the way that you wish you did things? If the Dungeon Master was sort of secretive and you had to try to figure out what armor class that you hit, which is a whole other thing which we're not going to get into at all because that's not how I'm going to run my game. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope that helped. I hope it just kind of opens a window to some of the older mechanics and the way things were done back in the day. And if you want me to go into a little bit more about like THAC0 and why armor classes the number would get lower the better your armor was in these older versions of D&D, let me know and I'll be more than happy to research that and do a video on it. I've done some basic research, but I would want to do more before I try to get into a more comprehensive explanation or history of the descending armor class system in older D&D. Needless to say, it's tied to old tabletop strategy war games. But yeah, like I said, I hope this helped. Subtract enemy armor class from your THAC0. That's the number you need to roll or better. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care.